Welcome to Habeas Treasurers, where I try to decipher this book, There's Treasure Inside by Jon Collins Black, in order to find one of the 5 hidden treasures. On today's episode, I'll be continuing my breakdown of the Pokemon box chapter. Let's begin. At the beginning of part 2 of the book on page 200, the author provides a brief introduction to the hunt for the 4 smaller treasure boxes. He discusses a variety of topics, including why he chose to hide multiple boxes and the challenges he faced because of this decision. Overall, I thought the introduction did a nice job of explaining the author's reasons for separating the hunt this way. But then I thought, what if the introduction also contained clues for part 2 of the book, including clues for the Pokemon box? And if there are clues in the introduction, how would they be organized so that you would know which clues go with which boxes? My guess is that the clues are organized by paragraph. There are 12 paragraphs in the introduction and 4 treasure boxes. That means, if I'm right with my math, 3 paragraphs contain clues for each box. Now I could only come up with 2 logical ways to assign the paragraphs to the boxes. Here they are. Either the first box, in the book this is the Forest Fen treasure, gets paragraphs 1, 2, and 3, or it gets paragraphs 1, 5, and 9. After reviewing the paragraphs against what I know about the Pokemon box, I decided that the second option is more likely. This means that the Pokemon box clues, if there are any, are going to be in paragraphs 2, 6, and 10. Now, as I've mentioned in my previous videos, I think the Pokemon box is hidden in New Orleans, so I tried to make connections from the paragraphs to places in the city. Let's start with paragraph 6. He writes, I quickly realized that a little order was needed to quell the potential chaos. One of the things I discovered about Mardi Gras in New Orleans is that there are actually many different parades that take place. Each parade is sponsored by a different organization or crew and takes a different route through the city. One of the crews is called the Knights of Chaos, and here is their parade route. It starts in the Garden District and travels up St. Charles Avenue to Canal Street and ends near the Roosevelt Hotel. I think the author may be using this parade route to help provide some order to the hunt. You may remember from my earlier video that a number of clues, including the overexposed picture at the end of the chapter and the design on the Pokemon box coin, both connect to the Roosevelt Hotel. Another line from paragraph 6 is, the thought of this made my head spin. Now at first, I couldn't find a connection with this line to New Orleans. Then I remembered in the story the author experiences Pokemon Go for the first time in Portland, Maine. So I did a Google search and found that there's a famous lighthouse in Portland called the Portland Headlight. I think the spinning light in the lighthouse might be what the author is referring to when he says, made my head spin. But what does a lighthouse in Maine have to do with New Orleans? Well, on Camp Street, close to the parade route, there's an odd-shaped building called the Camp Street Lighthouse that looks a lot like the Portland Headlight. Now this next clue is a bit of a stretch, but I thought I would throw it in just because it may turn out to be helpful. The first line in paragraph 6 is, but perhaps the greatest challenge of all was figuring out how to write one book with clues to 5 separate destinations. There is actually a book called The Greatest Challenge of Them All by Stephanie Lawrence. Why is this important? Well, the beginning of the Knights of Chaos parade route is right across the street from Lawrence Square. Spelled differently, but sounds the same. And also, maybe more importantly, across the street is a children's library that was one of the original Carnegie libraries built in New Orleans. Remember that Jon Collins Black owns his own children's book publishing company, and I have a suspicion that books and libraries are a common theme across multiple treasures, including the Pokemon box. And finally, the last sentence of paragraph 6 reads, to organize things, I decided to segregate the hints and clues for 4 of our boxes into their own individual chapters, leaving the rest of the book solely for the clues to our largest treasure box. There's a lot in this sentence. Let's start with the word segregate. This is a powerfully charged word. He could have used the word separate, but instead chose segregate. Why? Well, in New Orleans in 1960, there was an effort to desegregate public schools that made national news. 4 6-year-old black girls were selected to attend all-white schools. 3 of the girls went to one school together, and 1 girl was sent to a school all by herself. The girl's name was Ruby Bridges. I think the author is using this famous event as a bridge to a clue. The line, 4 of our boxes, could refer to the 4 girls, and the word solely could refer to Ruby because she was the only black student at her school. I then think the author uses the phrase, our largest treasure box, to have us translate that to the lion's share box. Putting it all together, Ruby, solely, lion, the author might be making a reference to the ruby slippers from The Wizard of Oz. It's a bit of a stretch, I know, and I'm not sure that this one's right, but there's a famous diner in New Orleans that's called the Ruby Slipper, and one of its locations is across Canal Street from the Roosevelt Hotel. I actually ate there twice when I was in New Orleans. It was delicious, as well as being affordably priced. Now let's turn our attention to paragraph 10. At first glance, this one seems pretty straightforward and should be taken simply at face value. He writes, each treasure box also comes with a special commemorative coin designed by Seth Gould. However, I actually think this one might be a clue as well. Here's what I mean. Remember the opening line of the Pokemon box chapter, I was 5.5 years old when my parents crammed our hard case Samsonite luggage into the hatchback of the family station wagon. Well, we can use his age to get an approximate date for his trip to New Orleans. From other parts of the book, it appears that the author was born in January of 1971. That would make him 5.5 around July of 1976, just about the same time that the US was celebrating its bicentennial anniversary. Well, in a previous video, I discussed how I thought the last 2 pages of the Pokemon box chapter referenced many different locations around Elk Place in New Orleans. And during my time walking around Elk Place, I discovered these bicentennial coin-shaped markers in the ground that celebrate all the important events in New Orleans history. Now let's look at the other line in paragraph 10. Each coin has been placed inside its corresponding box. The other thing I noticed when I was walking around Elk Place was that the major buildings, the library, the police station, the hospital, they all had their own corresponding painted streetcar-shaped boxes. Could this be what he's referring to? Maybe. Anyway, that's all I've got for today's video. In my next video, I'll explain why I think this Elk Place statue of Molly Marine could be the Froakie with the cute face.